All right, Paul, let me first say congratulations on your pursuit of pro golf. And then, secondly, let me say you've got a really good golf swing. So, um, you've done nice work on your own swing, and you do some really great things. So, it's no surprise to me that you made it to final stage of Champions Tour Q School. So, let's see if we can get you all the way through and clean this up. So, um, the next thing I'd say is thank you for sending me such good quality videos here, beautiful range and really good lighting. So this analysis is pretty easy. Let's talk about the backswing first of all from this down the line view. Really like a lot of things that you do in your backswing early. Nice change of flex in the knees, good rotation, hand path moving in, and then this position you get to at the top is, pretty standard of what I see from a lot of good players. And there's a small adjustment I would make here, but I'll come back to that in a second. Um, in transition, a little bit of a shallowing move on the club. There's nice rotation of your body, which I'm impressed with. At 50 years old, it doesn't seem like you've lost anything there from an ability to rotate. Club shallows out, drops back behind the hands just a little bit in a method that I don't prefer, but I'll come back to that again in a second. And through impact, I can tell that you've got a little bit of what I would call the good player's disease, where you have a little bit what I call too much force across the shaft. And what I mean by that is the hands at this moment through the ball are really, really putting a strong force across the shaft this way. That's kind of denoted by how much shaft lean you have and how close the left hand is to being outside the right thigh. And it's also denoted by how, when this goes around the corner, you're holding on to flexion in your left wrist just a little bit too long. And when it comes out and exits on this side in this late fall through, you see a little bit of rotation of the face there. And so not terrible moves here. There's nothing about your golf swing that's terrible. So let's just get that on the record. We're just talking small kind of cleanup things here. So let's go back to talking a little bit about the move that I don't care for in what you're doing here. So there's a shaft shallowing craze out there right now on social media, and it's become very popular and in vogue, and for good reasons. A big preference of mine is to see the golfer shallow the club early in transition, and in your case, you're so good and you're so talented that you're going from a moderately kind of steep position to what I would consider a very, very shallow position late here. And the way that you're doing that is a method that I don't prefer. And so if we look at your hands on the handle right here, we can apply basically three torques to this club. And what we're going to be concerning ourselves with is the torque that we refer to as beta torque. Okay? And beta torque means basically out of the plane of motion. So that would be steepening. We can torque it this way, or we can shallow it this way. And how that occurs, that steepening or shallow occurs, is basically between our hands at the midpoint of that grip, there's a net force that we're applying to that club. And we can take our left hand and pull the grip around in a circle this way, and we can pull our right hand back this way, and that torque, that circular torque on the club would be laying the shaft down, okay? Or we could do the opposite. We could torque it the other way and stand it up. Now, that's known as a couple, that mid-hands couple. When you have the two hands moving in opposite fashions, it's creating a rotational torque around this center of mass on the golf club. So it's making that center of mass translate in either a shallow fashion or a steep fashion based on how you apply this mid-hands couple down here. Okay, I know I'm talking A lot of technical terminology here, but basically you can use your hands to lay the shaft down or stand the shaft up. And my preference is that couple that you're applying down here, I like to see that applied much earlier and much less than you're doing it in transition, so that the club shallows early and we can actually kind of steepen it late. And when I say steepen it, that means actually putting a couple on the grip that's going to kick the sweet spot a little bit more in line with our hands way down here. Okay? Because when you are creating that shallowing couple right here very, very late, what you're doing is you're basically creating a lag move. And the lag move is where you're going to have that handle leaning really far forward and the shaft leaning forward, which is going to A, reduce dynamic loss and hit the ball lower, but B, it's going to make it a little bit more difficult to manage the club face. So what's the difference? Well, if you look at an early shallow versus a late shallow, I basically stopped you in a position there where the shaft is kind of superimposed on your right edge of your forearm, going through that elbow. And so if I stop this player at that same position, look at the differences where the club heads are. So his club head is more lowered down, which means essentially he shallowed the club a bit sooner in early transition than you did, whereas yours still has a little bit of a ways to go. Okay, your hands still have to go more out toward the ball, and that means that the club is going to continue to lay down because the nature of the fact that we're standing to the side of the ball, we do have to apply some outward force across his handle. And when you do that, that center of mass is going to drop even further back behind you. So you can see yours gets well below the forearm late and a little bit more back behind the hands and lower down, versus over here on the right, you can see it's a little more in line. Not a lot. Again, like I said earlier, there's not a lot wrong with your swing. There's just some subtle things to kind of clean up. So all of my work with you would be done mostly in the backswing. Okay? I would like to see the butt of the club getting just a little bit deeper by adding a little bit less external rotation to the shoulder and a little bit more adduction. Okay, so external rotation, what do I mean by that? So if we look at this forearm bone here, and if we make that forearm bone rotate in this direction in the backswing, that is externally rotating your trail shoulder, your right shoulder. That move limits the depth that you can get to the backswing for a number of reasons. But primarily it's because you are adducting the shoulder, which means your bicep tricep is staying closer to your rib cage, so to speak. And if you look over here on the right, you'll see a golfer that's putting in shoulder abduction. You'll see how horizontal this upper humerus bone looks right there. And what that's doing is it's letting the butt of the club simply travel further around the arc, which allows the club to shallow more when we start down in transition. Okay? And so in your case, you've really externally rotated that trail shoulder. And the problem is there's very little range of motion in that capacity. It's a very tight muscle, that shoulder, when you externally rotate it. And when you've got those elbows squeezing together as tight as you have them here, you can almost assure that you have no abduction to the shoulder and you have very little internal rotation. So what I would want to see from you is small thing in the backswing here. I love most of what you're doing in your golf swing. So you get to this point, I want you to feel like, if we draw a line down from the butt of the club here and we say, okay, the butt of the club is that deep right now, I want you to feel like you're going to continue as you go up to push the butt of the club diagonally away from you. So you'd make the butt of that grip go over that line. And okay, so how would I do that? So there, I'm going to stop it. It should be on it right now. How would I do that? Well, I would potentially allow this right elbow to fly, if you will. Little Jack Nicklaus move. Let it move away from the rib cage just a little bit, like you see the golfer over here on the right doing. And go ahead and let the elbows just kind of softly separate just a little bit. The goal is just simply to relocate at the top of your backswing the handle of this golf club just right over here, just marginally. I don't need to change the pitch of the shaft. I don't need to change the club base alignment. Now, here's what I will say. As you start to abduct that shoulder a little bit, that shaft, as this trail arm starts to look a little bit more like this, a little bit more horizontal across, and then a little bit more up, that shaft is going to get probably a little bit more in a straight line at the target at the top. So we're talking about moving the butt of the club there, 1 or 2 inches more behind you at the top of the backswing, and potentially having the shaft stand up just a little bit more. Now, the reason why that's important is this. The club rotates, as you know, around the center of mass. And if I apply a force that is kind of in a downward and outward fashion in early transition, that center of mass is going to translate and rotate in that direction because it's trying to get into a straight line with the net force that's being applied on the club. And because you've got it in a little bit of a laid off type position, your club doesn't quite shallow as much as it's capable of. But if you look over here on the right, you'd see, okay, here's the backswing. You could see how the shaft gets pointed almost down the target line. And then when he changes directions, that net force on that grip is very much kind of in this direction. You're going to see that center of mass work back and around behind him, so that it gets into a very shallow position coming down from the inside. And that shallowness gets the golfer to want to rotate and all of those things. And then through the ball, there won't be so much shaft leaning. We'll see more of a free release like this right here around the corner. That's not a flip. The face isn't turning over. He's just not dragging the handle through impact and leaning the shaft a whole bunch. Whereas in your case, we see a lot of shaft lean. So see a late shallowing move and then a lot of shaft lean in there and kind of a drag of that handle low and around the corner there. And then you get that little bit of face rotation up here, whereas you don't quite see that on the golfer that's kind of free releasing it over there. So hope this video helps you. Again, I think you're well on your way. And I really, really like the moves that you've got going on. You just need a little bit of finessing nearing the top of that backswing to set up just a little bit bigger moment of force. And that moment of force is acting on that center of mass to cause that club to shallow just a hair more, and then throwing that thing around the corner and not dragging that handle through impact. Hope this video helps. If you need me to jump on a live Zoom call with you, I can to kind of further explain, but I think you're well on your way.